The rich man's dog is worth more than you. That's what my brother said, smiling across a candlelit table, while guests in black tuxedos and glittering gowns laughed like it was the best joke they'd heard all night. The violinist paused for half a beat, uncertain if he'd misheard, before continuing to play as if humiliation were part of the evening's entertainment. I remember the sound of my own heartbeat louder than the applause, and as their laughter echoed, I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because I already knew something they didn't. I was the one funding his company. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration, a milestone for my brother Ryan's tech startup, Blue Ridge Innovations, recently valued at over $100 million. A family success story, as the glossy invitation had said. I hadn't wanted to go. I told Mom that morning over coffee that I'd rather stay home. She insisted. It's family, Emily. You can't avoid him forever. Family. That word had always meant something different to Ryan than it did to me. To him, it was a hierarchy. To me, it was history, one we both carried but wore differently. He wore it like a medal. I carried it like a bruise. The ballroom at the Grand Orpheus Hotel sparkled with the kind of wealth that pretends to be effortless crystal chandeliers, white roses in silver vases, champagne flowing like apology. I stood near the back next to a marble pillar, invisible, but watching everything. Ryan thrived in the spotlight. Always had. Even as kids, he'd stand on the living room couch pretending it was a stage, while I was the one holding the flashlight pretending it was a spotlight. Emily, he'd called earlier that night, voice warm enough to sound like brotherly affection, but sharp enough to remind me who owned the room. Over here, every pair of eyes turned toward me. I felt like a spotlight had burned through my dress. I walked over heels, clicking like punctuation marks on a sentence I didn't want to finish. Everyone, Ryan announced, raising his glass. This is my little sister. She's what is it again? Marketing something, SEO consultant, I said quietly. He smirked. Ah, yes, SEO. The mysterious art of making Google care about your existence. Laughter. A wave of it. Polite. Cruel. Mom shot him a look. Dad looked at his plate. It wasn't the first time Ryan had made me the evening's entertainment, but tonight his cruelty had a polish to it, like a performance he'd rehearsed. When dessert arrived, a ridiculous tower of spun sugar and gold leaf, Ryan leaned back in his chair, his voice louder than necessary. You know, he said, my investor told me something interesting. In the business world, value is everything. Some people just don't have any. A few guests chuckled uncertainly. He wasn't finished. The rich man's dog is worth more than you, Emily. The words hung in the air, sharp and cold. A waiter froze mid-step. Mom gasped softly. Then came the laughter. Louder this time, like a wave breaking over me. I felt every muscle in my body tighten, but I didn't look away. I just smiled. A calm, almost amused smile. The kind that hides a storm behind glass. You might be right, I said. Dogs are loyal after all. A few people shifted awkwardly. Ryan's smirk flickered just for a second, but then the MC's voice boomed over the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, please join me in welcoming the main investor of Blue Ridge Innovations, the reason tonight's celebration is possible, Ms. Emily Sanders. The room froze. Forks clattered against plates. Ryan's face drained of color so fast I thought he might faint. Every head turned toward me. Every pair of eyes, the same ones that had laughed seconds ago, now tried to readjust their expressions into something like respect. I stood up slowly, steady and deliberately. Investor Ryan stammered, his voice cracking. You're joking. But the MC continued, oblivious. Blue Ridge's first and largest funding round, the one that saved the company from liquidation, came from Ms. Sanders' private trust. I stepped forward, the sound of my heels echoing across the ballroom. Surprise, I said softly. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Ryan's mouth opened-closed, then opened again like a fish pulled from water. How could you— Through an investment group, I interrupted. You remember Westfield Capital? You pitched them 2 years ago? He nodded slowly, realization dawning. You're Westfield, I was, I said, until tonight. Silence. Then a few whispers. Someone actually gasped. I reached for the microphone, the MC still held my hand steady. Since my brother's company has grown so much, I think it's time to step back and let new investors come in. My shares will be transferred by the end of the week. Ryan's jaw clenched. He knew what that meant. My 20% share was leverage his safety net. Without it, his empire would wobble. I smiled, still calm. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the dinner. Then I set down the mic, turned, and walked out. Behind me, the whispers grew louder. The violinist had stopped playing entirely. For the first time that night, no one was laughing. Outside, the night air felt cold and clean. I took a deep breath, the city lights stretching endlessly before me. Somewhere behind those windows, my brother was realizing that the sister he'd mocked had just undone him quietly, elegantly, completely. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. And as I walked down the marble steps, my phone buzzed with a notification from the stock exchange feed I still followed out of habit. Blue Ridge Innovations shares down 4%. I smiled to myself. Some lessons are expensive. Others are priceless. That was the night my revenge began, not with rage, but with silence. The morning after dinner, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Missed calls, texts, mentions. My inbox was overflowing with subject lines that read like gossip headlines. Did you really fund your brother's company? That speech last night? What happened between you two? I stared at the screen, the blue light slicing through the early dawn haze. The city outside was still asleep, but I could feel the tremor of what I'd done rippling through every boardroom and family group chat in the country. I'd gone nuclear without raising my voice. By 8, my mother showed up at my apartment without knocking. Her face was pale, her eyes red, not from anger, but exhaustion. "Emily," she said softly, closing the door behind her. "What did you do?" "I told the truth," I said. She sighed. "You humiliated your brother in front of his investors." I looked at her. He humiliated me my entire life. Last night I just stopped playing to the audience. She sat down on my couch, her hands twisting a handkerchief. "You two used to be inseparable. Do you even remember that?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "I remember him taking my college fund to start his company. I remember Dad saying we had to support his dreams. I remember working 3 jobs to finish school while he bought his first Tesla." She flinched. That was years ago. And he never apologized. We sat in silence for a moment. The clock on the wall ticked too loud for the small space. She finally whispered, "Your father's going to be furious." I know, I said, picking up my coffee mug. But fury is easier to deal with than pity. At 9:30, the first article went live. Blue Ridge CEO's sister revealed as secret investor. The thumbnail was a freeze frame from the dinner, me holding the microphone, Ryan's face twisted in disbelief. I scrolled past the comments, my stomach tightening. She played him like a queen. Finally, some poetic justice. Sibling rivalry or corporate warfare by 10. My phone rang again this time. Harriet, my financial advisor. Her voice was brisk, professional, but I could hear the thrill beneath it. "You've officially broken the internet, Emily." "Fantastic," I said dryly. "You know the board is panicking, right? Ryan's stock dropped 6% overnight. Investors want answers." "Let them ask him," I said. She paused. "You do realize he'll come after you for this?" "Publicly." "I know." "Then maybe it's time we discuss options," she said. "You still hold controlling shares through your trust. You could pull out entirely, or you could use that leverage." I didn't answer immediately. The truth was, I hadn't thought that far ahead. Last night wasn't about strategy. It had been about dignity. "Schedule a meeting," I said finally. "Let's see how far he's willing to fall." When I hung up, my phone buzzed again, Ryan. The name flashed like a warning. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Emily," his voice came through sharp, clipped. "What the hell was that last night?" "Facts," I said simply. "You ambushed me in front of everyone." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly how you humiliate people, in front of everyone." He went silent for a moment. "You think this makes you look strong? You just embarrassed the whole family." No, Ryan, I said evenly. You did that the moment you opened your mouth. He laughed, that low, condescending laugh I'd heard my whole life. You think you're some kind of hero now? You're nothing without that trust fund. I almost smiled. Then I guess you're nothing without me. He hung up. I stood by the window watching the city pulse below. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt instead was clarity, a painful kind of light that burns away denial. By afternoon, Blue Ridge Innovations issued a press release. The company confirms Emily Sanders was an early private investor. The CEO expresses gratitude for her contribution and looks forward to continuing the family's shared legacy. Shared legacy. I almost laughed. The statement was damage control wrapped in hypocrisy. Ryan was trying to spin humiliation into harmony. Around 3, Dad called. His tone was measured, diplomatic, the way he always sounded before delivering bad news. You made a mess, Emily. I made the truth public. You made it personal. It already was personal. He sighed. Whatever you think you accomplished, it's going to come back to you. You don't humiliate powerful men without consequences. Then I guess he should have thought of that before he made me his punchline. There was a long pause. Your mother's worried about you. I'm fine, I said. Really. But I wasn't. Not yet. That evening I went for a walk near the waterfront. The city was glowing tall glass towers reflecting the setting sun, waves breaking gently against the pier. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of silence not as punishment, but as peace. Ryan's words still echoed somewhere in my memory. The rich man's dog is worth more than you. But now they sounded smaller, distant, almost absurd. When I got home, I opened my laptop and started digging through old financial files. The deeper I went, the more I found hidden loans, shell accounts, quiet transactions funneled through offshore subsidiaries. He'd been using my original investment to cover losses, keeping his empire alive on money that still technically belonged to me. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. Then I whispered, "You really shouldn't have underestimated the woman who built your foundation." At midnight, Harriet called again. "Emily, if what I'm seeing in these numbers is real, you could take control of the board." "I'm not interested in control," I said. "Just a correction." "Same thing, darling," she replied. "Same thing." After she hung up, I closed my laptop and looked at my reflection in the dark window. My face looked different, somehow older, sharper, quieter. Last night had been a spark. But what came next? That would be fire. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars trapped beneath glass, and I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with remembering who you are. By Monday morning, the headlines had gone from gossip to warfare. Sibling scandal, rocks Blue Ridge Innovations. Investor versus CEO. The Sanders family implodes. The photo on every business site showed Ryan mid-speech at the gala, veins tight in his neck, eyes flashing with panic. I'd gone from invisible sister to the ghost haunting his empire. When I arrived at Blue Ridge's headquarters that morning, the receptionist froze mid-greeting. Her smile flickered like a faulty bulb. "Ms. Sanders," she said, hesitating over my name as if it now carried a charge. "Mr. Sanders is in the boardroom with the executives." "Perfect," I said. "So am I." I didn't wait for permission. The glass doors opened silently, revealing a dozen people seated around the table, suits, tablets, the faint smell of stress. Ryan stood at the head of the table mid-presentation. His voice faltered when he saw me. "Emily," he said slowly, "this is a private meeting. Not anymore." The room went still. Every executive shifted in their seats, pretending to check notes, but clearly savoring the tension. "I'm not here to fight," I said, setting my bag down. "I'm here to clarify." Ryan's jaw clenched. "Clarify what ownership?" I said simply. 20% through Westfield Capital, which, as you all know by now, is me. That makes me your largest individual shareholder. A low murmur spread around the room. One of the older board members, Charles Holt, cleared his throat. "Ms. Sanders, that would technically entitle you to a seat on the board." "Correct," I said. "And I'm taking it." Ryan slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. No, I said calmly. This is business. He turned to the others, desperate. You can't let her do this. She's not qualified, Charles interrupted. She has a degree in business strategy and digital marketing from Columbia Ryan. Technically, she's more qualified than most of us here. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. I pulled out a folder and began sliding papers across the table documents Harriet had prepared overnight. These are the investment reports showing the capital influx that saved Blue Ridge 2 years ago. Without that, the company would have defaulted on its venture debt. My money, my name kept this company alive. Ryan's face reddened. You're twisting history. No, I said, voice steady. I'm documenting it. He stepped toward me, lowering his voice. Why are you doing this? I met his eyes. Because you made me your shadow. I just decided to stand where the light hits. The boardroom door opened suddenly. Harriet walked in, heels clicking, confidence like armor. Apologies for the interruption, she said smoothly. I'm counsel for Ms. Sanders. Just here to ensure everything remains transparent. Charles looked from her to me. You planned this. Only the part where I stop pretending I don't belong, I said. Ryan's voice rose again. You can't just walk in here and take over my company. Correction, Harriet said, flipping through her tablet. It's our company. And as per the bylaws, Ms. Sanders' voting rights supersede yours on key financial decisions. He turned pale. You're bluffing. Try me, she said. For the next 20 minutes, the conversation turned technical, capital ratios, equity dilution, investor confidence. I said very little, letting the facts speak. Harriet handled the firepower. I just watched Ryan unravel. When it ended, Charles nodded respectfully toward me. Welcome to the board, Ms. Sanders. Ryan stormed out, slamming the door so hard, the sound echoed like thunder through the glass halls. The executives began gathering their notes, whispering. I stayed seated, my fingers pressed against the polished table, feeling its cold surface steady, grounded. Congratulations, Harriet murmured as she closed her laptop. You just became the storm inside his castle. I didn't smile. He'll hit back. Of course he will, she said. But next time, it'll be in public. He can't resist the spotlight. When she left, I sat alone for a long moment. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, the skyline shimmered endless towers, each one a reflection of ambition, greed, or both. Ryan and I had grown up chasing different kinds of approval. He wanted to be admired. I just wanted to be seen. And now that I finally was, I didn't know whether it felt like victory or exposure. At noon, my phone buzzed with a message from him. You think you've won? You haven't even started losing yet. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. That evening, I went to my parents' house. Mom answered the door, looking tired but softer than before. He's furious, she said. I expected that. She hesitated. You're scaring him. Good. Emily, she said gently, don't let this turn you into him. I looked past her, into the familiar warmth of the home I'd grown up in, the framed family photo still hanging above the fireplace, the one taken before the world taught us about pride and debt and disappointment. I'm not him, I said quietly, but I am done being his victim. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, the city glittering beneath me. The wind smelled like rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Ryan's company was built on borrowed faith investors' image and my silent money. Now that silence is gone. I didn't plan to destroy him. Not yet. Destruction was too easy. No, what I wanted was precision. Because revenge wasn't about chaos. It was about control. The rain started before dawn, soft, hesitant, the kind that carries memories instead of thunder. I woke to the sound of it against the glass, and for a moment I wasn't 31 again. I was 10, sitting by the same window in my parents' old house, watching Ryan ride his bike down the driveway while Dad cheered, and I held the camera. He'd fallen once hard but gotten up laughing. Back then I thought we'd always be a team. By 8 a.m., my inbox was full again, media requests, investor inquiries, anonymous tips. But one email stopped me cold. The subject line read, "You don't know what your brother's been hiding. no name, no signature. Just an attachment, a scanned document marked Confidential Internal Audit. It detailed a transaction between Blue Ridge Innovations and a shell entity called Havenbrook Technologies. Millions of dollars moving off the books, disguised as R&D expenses. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. Then I grabbed my phone and called Harriet. "Please tell me you're sitting down," I said. She was quiet for a beat. "You found something?" "I think I found everything." Within an hour, we were at her office, glass walls, minimalist decor, the kind of place where power moved silently. She scanned the files, her brow tightening. "This isn't just sloppy accounting," she said. "This looks deliberate. Meaning your brother's not just arrogant. He's breaking federal law." I leaned back, staring at the city below. "He's using investor money or laundering it," she said. "Either way, if this leaks, the stock will crater." The word stock hit me like a pulse. I pictured Ryan's empire, the shares, the valuation, the boardroom where I'd just claimed a seat. Everything built on a lie. "Do I expose him?" I asked. Harriet looked at me carefully. "Not yet. Information is leverage. Use it before you burn it." That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house again. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of wet earth and old secrets. Dad was in his study, the same mahogany desk he'd used since before I was born. "You made quite a scene at that dinner," he said without looking up. I made a point. He closed the ledger he was pretending to read. "Do you enjoy humiliating your brother?" "Do you enjoy pretending he's flawless?" I shot back. He frowned. "You're angry." "I'm awake," I said quietly. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said almost gently, "Your mother tells me you're joining the board. Is that true?" "Yes." "Good," he said. "Maybe you'll learn how hard it is to build something from nothing." "Ryan didn't build it from nothing," I said. "He built it from my trust fund." His silence was an admission. "I knew about the first transfer," he said finally. "He came to me desperate. Said he needed a short-term loan." I thought, "You thought what?" I interrupted. "That I wouldn't notice. That I didn't matter, Emily. You were 23. You didn't understand business. Maybe not," I said, voice trembling now, but I understood betrayal. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw something like regret flicker across his face. "You're more like me than you think," he said. "You want justice." "So did I once." "Be careful. It consumes people." I left before he could finish the thought. That evening, Harriet called again. "The board's planning an emergency meeting," she said. "They're nervous about the rumors. Someone leaked partial numbers to the press. Ryan or one of his allies. Either way, they're circling." I stared out my window, watching the reflection of lightning in the glass. "Then it's time I gave them something to really worry about." "Emily," she said slowly, "what are you planning?" Just a reminder, I said that not every family feud stays private. By midnight, I was drafting an anonymous email to the Tribune's business desk attaching fragments of the audit, just enough to raise questions, not destroy the company outright. I added a single line before sending, "Follow the money from Havenbrook Technologies." As soon as I hit send, my heart raced. I didn't know if it was adrenaline or fear. Maybe both. A few hours later, as the city began to wake, my phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. "You're playing with fire, Emily. Step away before you get burned." No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. Ryan always did, hate losing control. I set my phone down and whispered to the empty room, "Then maybe it's time he learns what fire feels like." Outside, the first sunlight broke through the clouds, catching the edge of the skyline like a blade. The storm wasn't over, it had just changed shape, and this time, it was mine to command. 3 days after the leak, I got an invitation I never expected. It came in the form of a thick cream envelope slipped under my apartment door, embossed with gold lettering and sealed with the Blue Ridge insignia. Inside, a single card read, "Family Dinner, Friday, the Harbor Club, 7 p.m., no explanation, no apology, just the time, the place, and Ryan's signature written in his sharp, confident hand. For a moment, I almost laughed. He'd humiliated me over dinner once, and now after everything he wanted another round. By the time Friday arrived, the headlines had turned vicious. The Tribune's article had gone live that morning questioning Blue Ridge's offshore transactions and the mysterious Havenbrook technologies. The company's stock had dropped another 9%, and Ryan's public statement, all polish, charm, and empty denial, had only made things worse. Harriet called me that afternoon. "Are you sure you want to go?" she asked. "I have to," I said. "He's never been this quiet. That means he's planning something." The Harbor Club was one of those places that pretended to be private, but existed solely for people who wanted to be seen pretending. Valets in red jackets, a string quartet by the window, $100 minimum per person for the privilege of dining above the city. Ryan was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the back with Mom and Dad. He looked perfect as always, tailored navy suit, slicked hair, the faintest smile that never reached his eyes. "Emily," he said, rising to kiss my cheek. "You look composed." "That's one word for it," I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. Mom gave a small nervous smile. "Let's just have a nice dinner, okay?" "No tension tonight." "Of course," Ryan said, folding his napkin with surgical precision. "After all, we're family." Dad stayed silent. He hadn't said much since the board meeting. I suspected he already knew about the leaked documents, maybe even who sent them. We ordered. Small talk followed hollow and forced. Ryan talked about company challenges and temporary setbacks. Mom nodded at all the right moments. I kept my hands steady on my wine glass, waiting. Finally, he leaned back and said, "So, Emily, how does it feel to be famous? You've been in every business column this week." "Infamous, maybe," I said. "But fame was always your addiction, not mine." He smirked. "Addiction, no little sister. Ambition. Something you never quite had." Mom shot him a warning look, but he wasn't finished. "You've always been comfortable on the sidelines, haven't you? Watching, waiting, investing other people's money because you were too afraid to risk your own." I let out a quiet laugh. "That's an interesting way to describe the reason your company still exists." His smile twitched. "Careful. You're starting to sound bitter." "I'm starting to sound informed," I said. He paused just long enough to confirm he'd understood the message beneath my words. Then he reached for his wine and said lightly, "Ah, yes. The audit. How convenient that a few private documents appeared in the press the same week my dear sister joined the board." Dad's voice cut through the tension. "Enough, both of you." But Ryan wasn't done. "Tell me, Emily, how did you get those files? You'd need internal access, wouldn't you?" I smiled faintly. "Don't worry, your secrets are safe for now." His hand tightened on the stem of his glass. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I said. "Havenbrook Technologies, March 18th transfer. Offshore routing through Belize. Do you want me to keep going, or would you prefer dessert first?" The color drained from his face. Mom gasped softly. "Emily," I didn't look at her. "You should have remembered something, Ryan. Every empire built on lies eventually pays interest." He leaned forward, his voice low. "You think you're clever, don't you? You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," I said calmly, "I think I do." The table went silent. Even the violinist's melody seemed to falter. Then Ryan laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. "Fine, you win this round. But if you drag the family name through the mud, you won't just take me down. You'll take everyone with you." Dad's fork clattered against his plate. "That's enough, Ryan." He ignored him. "You think you're protecting the family, Emily, but you're not. You're burning the legacy that made you." I stood. "Then maybe it deserves to burn." For a moment, no one moved. Then I placed my napkin neatly on the table, smiled at my mother, and said, "Thank you for dinner." As I turned to leave, Ryan said quietly, "Walk away now, and I'll forgive you. Stay, and I'll make you regret it." I didn't look back. "You've already done that once," I said, and it only made me stronger. Outside, the wind off the harbor was cold and sharp. The city glittered below like a million eyes watching from the dark. My phone buzzed with a new message from Harriet. The SEC just opened an inquiry into Blue Ridge. Someone tipped them off. I stared at the screen, the lights of downtown reflecting in my glassy eyes. Someone had escalated the game, and it wasn't me. The dinner hadn't an ending. It was the declaration of war. By Monday morning, the whispers had become headlines. Blue Ridge under federal review. SEC launches inquiry into Sanders Family Company. The media didn't even bother softening the language anymore. What had started as gossip was now blood in the water. I sat in Harriet's office, the blinds half closed, the air thick with the hum of fluorescent light and quiet panic. Her assistant had been fielding calls all morning, reporters, lawyers, investors, all wanting to know what I knew. "They're officially digging," Harriet said, tapping her pen against a folder marked SEC Correspondence. "Financial fraud, insider trading. Possible tax evasion. Your brother's in deep." I stared at the stack of papers on her desk, pages full of numbers, date signatures, proof that Ryan had taken everything good and twisted it into something poisonous. "Do they know about Havenbrook?" I asked. "They will soon," she said. "The subpoena list includes every shell company linked to Blue Ridge in the last 3 years. They'll find it." They should have comforted me. It didn't. Because when they came, the fallout wouldn't be clean. The Sanders name, Dad's business connections, Mom's charities would all take hits. Ryan's empire wasn't just his anymore. It was woven through every thread of our family's reputation. Harriet leaned forward. "You need to protect yourself. Legally and financially. I already transferred my shares," I said. "Westfield's holdings are separate now." "Good," she said. "But that won't protect you from public opinion. The court of image is crueler than the court of law." Her words echoed in my head long after I left her office. The city outside buzzed with Monday urgency cars, voices, construction life. But I felt detached, as if I were watching from behind glass. By noon, my phone started ringing again. This time, it wasn't reporters. It was family. Mom first. Her voice was trembling. "They're saying your brother could go to prison. Tell me it isn't true, Emily." "It's true," I said quietly. She gasped. "How could you let this happen?" I bit back the bitterness that rose like bile. "I didn't make him steal Mom." "But you started this," she said, her voice cracking. "You made it public." There it was, the old reflex to make me responsible for Ryan's sins. The pattern that had ruled my childhood. He acted, I was absorbed. "I didn't destroy him," I said. "He destroyed himself." "Families don't do this to each other," she whispered. Then maybe we stopped being a family the night he said I was worth less than a dog. The silence that followed was heavy final. When she hung up, I didn't try to call back. At 3 p.m., I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, curiosity or instinct, made me swipe. Ms. Sanders. The voice was calm, professional male. "This is Special Agent Thomas Reeves with the SEC Enforcement Division. I was hoping to speak with you regarding your investment history with Blue Ridge Innovations." "I expected this," I said. He paused as if gauging my tone. "You were listed as a major early investor. We'd like to know if you were aware of certain offshore accounts." "No," I said, "but I can show you evidence that your investigation is on the right track." There was a pause, interest now, not suspicion. "Evidence, I've been keeping records for over a year. Transactions, dates, board communications." I had a feeling something wasn't right. "Would you be willing to meet?" "Yes," I said. "But off the record at first." He agreed. We set a time for Wednesday morning. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the window, the city lights flickering against my face. I didn't look like the woman I used to be. I looked like someone sharper, someone dangerous. That night I went to the office building where Blue Ridge kept its executive suites. My board access card still worked. The halls were empty, silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Ryan's door was locked, but that never stopped me. I had the code, the same birthday he'd mocked me for still remembering. Inside his office was immaculate, staged like a photograph. Everything in its place. Except for one thing, a flash drive sitting by the edge of the desk labeled Havenbrook. For a second, I thought it might be bait. Then I remembered Ryan's arrogance. He'd never believe anyone could beat him at his own game. I pocketed it and left. When I got home, I plugged it into a clean laptop, my heart pounding. Folders appeared, contracts, emails, transfer receipts, dozens of them, offshore routing numbers, Cayman Islands accounts, even internal memos between Ryan and his CFO discussing liquidation of high-value shares before quarterly disclosure. He wasn't just lying, he was manipulating the market, dumping stock before the crash he knew was coming. I felt sick, furious, vindicated, all at once. I backed up the data, encrypted it, and sent a copy to Harriet. Then I stared at the empty glass of wine beside my computer and whispered, "This is it, Ryan. This is where your empire ends." Outside, the sirens of the city wailed faintly in the distance. Not for him yet, but soon. And as the clock struck midnight, I realized something strange. For the first time since that humiliating dinner, I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. Because revenge wasn't just a response anymore, it was justice disguised as patience. The day I handed the evidence to the SEC, the city felt unnaturally still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room on the 26th floor of the federal building, all steel and silence. Agent Reeves was waiting for me, a man who looked more like a professor than an investigator. Salt and pepper hair, calm eyes, a tone that didn't rise or fall. Across from him sat another agent, a woman named Kelly Tran, who took notes without looking up. "Thank you for meeting with us," Ms. Sanders Reeves said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "We understand this isn't easy. It's not," I said, sliding the flash drive across the table. "But it's necessary." Kelly plugged it in her fingers, flying over the keyboard. Numbers, emails, and transaction logs appeared on the monitor. The glow of evidence filled the room like a firelight. Reeves studied me carefully. "How long have you been aware of these activities?" "I suspected something a year ago," I said, "when I started getting reports that didn't align with the financial statements." "You didn't come forward sooner," he noted. "I didn't have proof," I said, "and I knew what my brother was capable of when cornered." He nodded slowly, understanding more than I said. "You'll likely be called as a witness," he said. "Your cooperation could be critical in establishing the timeline." "Then I'll testify," I said. "Whatever it takes." Kelly stopped typing. "You realize this will make you the face of the case, right? The sister who took down her brother. The press will devour that." "I've been devoured before," I said quietly. "This time I'm feeding the story myself." By the time I left the building, my hands were trembling. Not from fear, from release. The truth was no longer a secret locked inside my head. It was real, documented, irreversible. But that night, the war went public. Ryan called a press conference. The screen in my living room lit up with his perfectly rehearsed smile. Cameras flashed. He stood behind a podium adorned with the Blue Ridge logo, every inch of him composed his tone confident. "My sister has made some serious allegations," he began. "Allegations that are both false and malicious. This investigation is politically motivated, and I assure you, Blue Ridge Innovations remains fully compliant with all federal regulations." The audience clapped, paid loyalty disguised as support. Then he smiled wider. "Unfortunately, it seems certain family members have been manipulated by outside interests, individuals who want to profit from our downfall. I won't let that happen." The words were a dagger aimed straight at me. My phone began buzzing again, reporters, friends, strangers. Social media was already exploding. The narrative was shifting, the brilliant CEO betrayed by his jealous sister. I turned off the TV before the bile in my throat could rise any higher. By midnight, my building's doorman called. "Ms. Sanders, there's someone downstairs asking to see you. Says it's urgent." I almost didn't go down. But something in his tone made me grab my coat and take the elevator to the lobby. Ryan stood there, still in his tailored suit, his tie loosened, but his expression cold. The glass lobby reflected the smeared city lights, the only sound the faint, relentless drumming of late-night rain outside. He stood several feet away, letting the silence magnify the distance we'd traveled since that dinner. The air between us crackled with old wounds. "You shouldn't be here," I said. He smiled faintly. "Neither should you." "What's that supposed to mean?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're safe because you gave them files. You think the SEC will protect you when they realize you were complicit." "I wasn't complicit," I said, anger rising. "You funded it," he said sharply. "Your money built this company. You signed the first contracts. You approved the expansion. I didn't know what you were doing with it." "Intent doesn't matter in court," he said. "They'll drag you through the same mud." I crossed my arms. "So that's your plan? Drag me down with you?" "No," he said. "My plan is to make sure you understand what you've done. You've burned the bridge you were standing on." I stared at him, the memory of every humiliation flashing behind my eyes. The laughter, the mockery, the way he'd called me worthless. "I didn't burn it," I said. "I rebuilt it without you." For a moment, something cracked in his expression. Rage, fear, or both. Then he whispered, "You always thought you were smarter than me." "No," I said softly. "I just stopped believing your lies." He stepped back, his smirk returning. "Enjoy your moment, Emily. The higher you climb, the harder you'll fall." Then he turned and walked out into the night, leaving the door swinging behind him. I stood there for a long time, feeling the echo of his presence fade. For years I'd wanted his approval. Now all I wanted was distance. When I went back upstairs, the city was quiet again. But the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt loaded like the breath before a scream. Harriet called a few minutes later. "He's going to retaliate," she said. "Legally, publicly, personally, expect it." "I already do," I said. "Then brace yourself," she said. "Because this isn't the end. It's the part right before the collapse." After she hung up, I sat by the window watching the faint shimmer of lightning crawl along the skyline. Ryan thought this was about money, about power, about pride. He still didn't understand what it was really about. It was about justice, and justice has no family loyalty. The morning the subpoenas arrived, it rained again. Not a soft drizzle this time, but a relentless storm that pounded the city like judgment. I was in the middle of a video call with Harriet when her phone buzzed. She glanced down, then looked back at me. "It's happening," she said quietly. "They've served Blue Ridge." I exhaled slowly, the sound shaky through my speakers. All of them Ryan, the CFO, the finance director, and 3 board members. SEC, IRS, and state regulators are all in play. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with the sound of rain against my windows. Harriet leaned forward. "Emily, I need you to listen. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Ryan's going to lose everything, and when he does, he'll drag the family name through every headline he can find." "I don't care about the name," I said. "I care about the truth." She smiled faintly. "Then brace yourself, because the truth has teeth." By noon, the media had the story. Helicopters hovered above the Blue Ridge headquarters. Reporters camped outside the lobby, shouting questions at anyone wearing a suit. Is it true the company falsified investor reports? Did the CEO use offshore accounts? Was his sister involved? That last one burned. I watched the coverage from my apartment, the city glowing gray beneath the storm. Ryan appeared on screen, entering the building surrounded by lawyers. His expression was pure arrogance, not defiance, not fear, just the same polished charm he'd always worn like armor. Then I saw Mom behind him. She looked small, her umbrella trembling under the rain. I didn't realize she'd still stand beside him after everything. My chest tightened. The phone rang again. Harriet. "He's spinning the narrative," she said. "He's telling investors you leaked the data to short the stock, that you were manipulating the market for profit." I almost laughed. "So now I'm the villain." "In his story always," she said. "But don't underestimate how persuasive he can be." That afternoon, I met with Agent Reeves again at the Federal Building. He looked tired but focused. "We're moving fast," he said. "Your brother's lawyers are already pushing for a settlement, but the scale of the fraud makes it difficult." "How bad is it?" I asked. He slid a document across the table, page after page of numbers, names, transactions. Dozens of accounts, millions unreported. He was selling shares ahead of negative earnings reports, classic insider trading. I looked at the paper until the numbers blurred. He always said he wanted to be the smartest man in the room, I whispered. He forgot that arrogance isn't intelligence. Reeves nodded. We'll need your testimony to finalize the charges. You're the only one with direct proof that predates the board's involvement. I'll testify, I said. I won't run from this. When I left the building, I saw Ryan waiting by the curb. No cameras, no entourage. Just him in the rain, his suit soaked through. I should have walked past him. I didn't. Emily, he said, his voice low. We need to talk. I think we're past that, I said. He stepped closer. You don't understand what you've done. They're freezing everything, my accounts, my stocks, the house, even Dad's trust. That money was stolen, I said. He laughed bitterly. You think you're clean. You profited from it too. Every dividend, every bonus, every investment you made off that trust. You're part of it whether you like it or not. I met his eyes. Then let them investigate me too. For a second, something flickered in his expression. Disbelief, maybe even fear. You'd risk everything just to destroy me. No, I said quietly. To free myself. The words hit him harder than any accusation. He stepped back, rain dripping down his face. For once he didn't have a retort. When I got home, the power flickered from the storm. The apartment dimmed, the city lights outside smeared by the rain. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from Dad. Your brother's been charged. Come home. We need to talk. Home. That word felt foreign now. But I went. Their house looked smaller than I remembered, the same portraits on the wall, the same smell of old wood and memories that never quite faded. Mom sat on the couch holding a tissue. Dad stood by the fireplace, the television muted on the news. Ryan's mugshot filled the screen. Mom's eyes lifted when she saw me. They took him away, she whispered. Our son. I nodded. They took a criminal. She shook her head. He's still your brother. Not anymore, I said softly. Dad turned from the fireplace. His face was hard, unreadable. You've made your point, he said. Now what? You've destroyed him. You've humiliated your family. What's next? I'll rebuild, I said, without lies. You think justice makes you righteous? He said bitterly. It just makes you alone. I met his gaze steady. Then I'd rather be alone than corrupted. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then I turned and walked out, closing the door behind me. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The city skyline shimmered under the streetlights, reflections glistening like shards of glass. Somewhere out there, the world was already moving on, but I wasn't ready to. As I stood under the dripping trees, I realized the truth. Justice doesn't end when the guilty fall. It ends when you stop carrying the weight of what they did to you. And I wasn't there yet, but I was getting closer. The courthouse smelled like rain and fear-polished wood, cold marble, and the faint metallic scent of nerves. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing as Ryan stepped out of the black SUV flanked by two attorneys. He looked thinner, sharper, his jaw set, like a man still clinging to the illusion of control. Inside, the air buzzed with quiet tension. I sat on the witness bench waiting for my name to be called, my hands folded in my lap. Harriet sat beside me, whispering last-minute advice. Stay calm. Tell the truth. Let him lose his own temper. I know, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was steady, practiced, almost detached. The judge entered. The room rose. Then the trial began. The prosecutor, a composed woman named Elise Grant, laid out the case like an autopsy. Blue Ridge Innovations, under the direction of Ryan Sanders, deliberately falsified quarterly earnings, laundered over $10 million through Havenbrook Technologies, and engaged in insider trading to manipulate the company's stock value. Every word felt like a hammer hitting the same bruise. Ryan sat across the room, expression unreadable. His attorney, a slick man named Cooper Wells, scribbled notes furiously. I could feel Ryan's eyes on me, heavy and cold. When my turn came, the bailiff called my name. Emily Sanders. Please take the stand. The courtroom fell silent as I stood. My heels echoed on the marble floor, every step a reminder of how far I'd come from that dinner where he'd laughed at me. The prosecutor smiled politely. Ms. Sanders, can you describe your relationship to the defendant? I took a breath. He's my brother. A ripple of whispers spread through the courtroom. The prosecutor continued. You were also an early investor in Blue Ridge Innovations. Correct, yes. How much did you invest? $2 million, I said. From my inheritance. And what was your involvement after that? I wasn't involved in daily operations. I trusted my brother to run the company ethically. Elise nodded. At what point did you suspect that wasn't the case? When I saw internal reports that didn't align with public filings, I said. And when I discovered the existence of Havenbrook Technologies, she projected a document on the screen, one of the emails from the flash drive. Is this your brother's signature? Yes. And you turned this evidence over to the SEC, yes. Thank you, Ms. Sanders. No further questions. I exhaled slowly, but the relief didn't last. Ryan's lawyer straightened his tie and smiled like a man about to perform. Ms. Sanders, he said smoothly, you've been described as driven, ambitious. Some might even say jealous of your brother's success. Is that fair? I met his gaze. No, I was never jealous of success built on lies. He smiled wider. And yet you publicly embarrassed him at a high-profile dinner, correct? I told the truth. He tilted his head. Or perhaps you saw an opportunity. The timing of your revelations coincided with a major downturn in the company's stock, a downturn you benefited from when you sold your shares shortly after. How convenient. A murmur went through the courtroom. Harriet leaned forward, sharply whispering, "Stay calm." I looked at him evenly. I didn't sell because I wanted to profit. I sold because I didn't want my money tied to corruption. Of course, he said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. And leaking those documents to the press, that was altruism too. I didn't leak them, I said. He arched an eyebrow. Then who did? I don't know. He turned to the jury with a half smile. So we're to believe that a mysterious leak just happened to occur days after you confronted your brother and gained a board seat. I said nothing. Silence is more powerful than defense. When he realized I wouldn't bite, he leaned in closer. Tell me, Ms. Sanders, do you hate your brother? The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought of the dinner, the laughter, the humiliation. I thought of Mom crying in her kitchen, Dad staring at the muted television, the storm that had washed away everything familiar. Then I said softly but clearly, no, I don't hate him. I just stopped protecting him. The courtroom was silent again, the kind of silence that makes even the walls listen. The lawyer hesitated, searching for his next weapon, but found none. No further questions. When I stepped down, I didn't look at Ryan, but I felt his eyes on me burning through every layer of calm I'd built. That evening the news called it the trial of blood and business. Pundits debated morality, ambition, and revenge like it was theater. My face was on every screen again, the sister who betrayed her brother. But behind the noise, something was shifting. Ryan's CFO took a plea deal that night. His finance director followed the next morning. By the end of the week, the prosecutors had everything they needed. Harriet called me that Friday. He's going to take a deal, she said. 5 years minimum. He's out of moves. I stared at the city through my window, the skyline still humming with light, the world still spinning. Good, I said quietly. It's time. But deep down, I knew this wasn't victory. It was the aftermath. And aftermaths always cost more than anyone expects. The verdict came on a gray Thursday morning, 5 years in federal prison, plus restitution to the defrauded investors. When the judge's gavel struck, the sound was clean and final. The same sound a door makes when it locks forever. Ryan didn't look at me when they led him away. He didn't look at anyone. His expression was blank, but his eyes, those sharp, restless eyes, finally looked hollow. The courtroom emptied slowly after that, people whispering, cameras, flashing footsteps echoing like fading applause after a tragedy no one wanted to watch anymore. Outside, the air smelled of wet concrete and cigarette smoke. Reporters swarmed near the steps, shouting questions. Emily, do you feel vindicated? Will you take over Blue Ridge? Do you still consider him your brother? I said nothing. I didn't owe them a soundbite. Justice isn't a headline. It's silence after noise. Harriet walked beside me, shielding me from the cameras. It's over, she said quietly. No, I said. It's finished. Over takes time. That evening, the city looked different. Calmer, maybe. The skyscrapers glittered like the world had decided to move on without me. My apartment felt too quiet. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for years, one Ryan had given me when his company first went public. To the start of everything he'd said back then. I poured it down the sink. The next few weeks blurred together. Headlines shifted. Disgraced CEO sentenced for fraud. Blue Ridge stock plummets 67%. Sister-turned whistleblower becomes symbol of corporate accountability. I was invited to talk shows, podcasts, and finance panels. People wanted my opinion on ethics, investment, even feminism in business. Everyone wanted the redemption arc, not the cost. I declined most invitations. But one caught my eye, a financial literacy nonprofit asking me to speak to young entrepreneurs about ethical investing. That felt different, real. When I arrived, the room was filled with students, some nervous, some hungry for success, all with notebooks open and eyes bright with ambition. I told them the truth. Money isn't evil, I said, but it amplifies who you already are. If you're kind, you can change lives. If you're cruel, you can destroy them. Choose early which one you'll be. Afterward, a young woman came up to me. My brother and I started a tech company last year, she said shyly. We fight a lot, but your story, it made me realize what happens if you forget why you started. Her eyes reminded me of my own years ago before the first betrayal. Don't let ambition erase love, I told her. But don't let love blind you to corruption either. 2 months later, the government seized the Blue Ridge headquarters. I went there once just to see it. The glass tower that used to symbolize my brother's empire is now surrounded by police tape and auction notices. Through the window, I could still see his office, the desk where he signed fake reports. The skyline he used to admire, like it belonged to him. A memory flickered him at 20, telling me we'd build something great together. Back then, I believed him. Maybe we both did. Emily, a voice said behind me. It was Mom. I hadn't seen her since the trial. She looked smaller somehow, her hair grayer, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her umbrella. I didn't know you'd be here, I said. I wanted to see it one last time, she said. All those years we thought it meant success. Turns out it was a monument to lies. I nodded. It's over now. She looked at me carefully. He still asks about you, you know. From prison. Says he wants to apologize. I stared at the rain-streaked glass. Maybe one day, I said. But not yet. Mom sighed, a sound half sorrow, half release. I lost both my children, she said quietly. No, I said softly. You lost the illusion of us. We're still here. Just truer. She didn't answer, but she nodded, and that was enough. When I got home, I found a letter waiting on my doorstep, no return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single line. You were right. The dog deserved better too. No signature, but I knew. I folded the letter and slipped it into the back of my journal. Not forgiveness, not closure. Just acknowledgement, a fragment of humanity in a story built on greed. Weeks turned into months. I sold my shares, started consulting for ethical startups, even invested in one, a renewable energy firm led by a group of women fresh out of college. We called it Lumen. It wasn't about revenge or legacy. It was about rebuilding something honest. One night as I watched the city lights blink from my window, Harriet texted me a link. Look who made Forbes' top 50 women in business ethics. I opened it. My name was there. Right below, Emily Sanders, whistleblower to founder turning corruption into change. For the first time in years, I smiled, without bitterness. The stock market would recover. The world would forget Ryan Sanders. But I'd learned something that no empire could buy. Power built on lies crumbles fast. But truth, that's the only investment that never loses value. The morning sunlight cut across my apartment, landing on a stack of unopened envelopes, invitations, proposals, interviews. For the first time in years, they didn't feel like noise. They felt like an opportunity. The storm had passed, and the silence it left behind wasn't empty. It has potential. My days slowly began to fill with purpose again. I met investors for Lumen, my new venture, over coffee instead of cocktails. No scripted dinner parties, no power games, just quiet conversations about sustainability, transparency, and second chances. I poured everything I had learned into it, not just about business, but about people. Harriet joined as legal counsel, half out of loyalty, half because she said she needed something pure to work on after years of corporate corruption. You do realize, she teased one morning, that you've become the poster child for ethical capitalism, I laughed. If that's even a real thing. It is now, she said, sipping her coffee. You made it one. 2 months after launch, our first prototype, a solar-powered water purifier, was featured in Tech Frontier Weekly. The headline read, "From Betrayal to Breakthrough, How One Woman Turned Scandal into Solution." I didn't feel proud so much as grateful. The kind of gratitude that comes from surviving a storm and realizing you're still standing. But peace doesn't mean the past stays buried. One Friday afternoon, as I packed up for the weekend, Harriet buzzed into my office. "You might want to take this call," she said. "It's from a correctional facility in Nevada." My stomach tightened. "Put it through." Static filled the line, then a familiar voice. "Emily. Ryan." A pause stretched across the connection. I could almost hear him searching for the right version of himself, the one that might reach me. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said finally. "I just wanted you to know. I get it now. The money, the power, the company, none of it mattered. I kept thinking I could fix everything if I just worked harder, played smarter. But the truth is, I destroyed everything that mattered before I ever realized what it was." His voice cracked just slightly. I stayed silent. He continued. "Mom sends me your interviews. Says you're changing things. I used to laugh at that kind of stuff. Now I read every word. Why are you calling me Ryan?" Another pause. "Because I wanted to say you were right. The night at the dinner, when I said what I said, I thought I was showing strength. But it was just weakness dressed in arrogance. There it was, the confession I never thought I'd hear. "I don't hate you," I said quietly, "but I don't miss you either." He let out a hollow laugh. "That's fair." We talked for a few more minutes about Mom, about Dad, about the nothingness that comes when you lose everything. When the line finally clicked dead, I sat there staring at the phone, realizing that closure doesn't come as a moment. It comes as an exhale you didn't realize you'd been holding. That night I visited Mom. She'd moved into a small cottage outside San Francisco, a simple place with garden herbs and an old piano. The air smelled like rosemary and lemon. "He called you," she said without looking up from her knitting. I nodded. Her hands stilled. "Did he sound like my son again?" "Parts of him," I said. "But not enough." She sighed. "Maybe that's enough for now." We sat in silence for a while. Then she smiled faintly. "You've always been stronger than you think, Emily. Even as a little girl. When you fell off your bike, you never cried. You just got back up, dusted off, and said, 'Again.'" "I didn't want to be strong," I said. "I just wanted peace." Sometimes, she said softly, "they're the same thing." The next morning I met with a potential investor, a quiet gray-haired woman who'd lost her husband's pension in a Blue Ridge fund. I expected anger. Instead, she smiled. "I read your article about accountability," she said. "It gave me hope. I want to invest in Lumen not for profit, but because I believe in what you're building." Her gesture felt like a circle-closing loss transformed into renewal. By summer, Lumen had tripled its initial funding. Our first batch of purifiers was deployed in rural communities, bringing clean water to over 5,000 families. One journalist called it redemption in a box. But to me, it wasn't redemption. It was my responsibility. On the anniversary of that infamous dinner, I stood by the waterfront watching the sunset burn gold over the bay. The city shimmered behind me, full of noise and ambition. I whispered more to myself than anyone. You said the rich man's dog was worth more than me. Turns out, I was the one who learned how to build something that feeds people instead of egos. The wind carried the words away, scattering them into the orange sky. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Harriet texted me later that night, front page feature again. You're officially trending. Lumen effect. Rebuild better. Want to celebrate? I smiled, typing back. Maybe tomorrow. Tonight, I just want quiet. The quiet wasn't empty this time. It was earned. In the distance, the city lights blinked, not mocking, not judging, just existing. Like me. A year after the trial, I found myself back in the same ballroom where everything had fallen apart. The chandeliers still glittered like 1,000 small suns, the same golden light spilling across the marble floors. But this time, I wasn't a guest clinging to someone else's reputation. I was the keynote speaker. The event was a charity gala for women entrepreneurs, an irony so poetic, I almost laughed when the invitation arrived. The same host who once introduced me as Ryan Sanders' little sister now greeted me with, "Please welcome our keynote guest, founder and CEO of Lumen, Emily Sanders." Applause filled the room, sharp and genuine. No one was laughing this time. As I stepped up to the podium, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall, not the timid woman who once hid behind her brother's shadow, but someone forged by fire and truth. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady. Some of you might remember a different dinner in this room. A dinner where I was told publicly that a rich man's dog was worth more than me. Everyone laughed, including me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked softly. But that laughter, I continued, wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark. Sometimes humiliation is just the universe's way of clearing space for something bigger, something truer. I talked about rebuilding, about the courage it takes to start over when the world knows your worst moment. About how failure doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. Redemption. I said isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right, quietly, relentlessly, without needing their applause. When I finished, the applause came anyway. Loud, sincere, rising to the chandeliers. I smiled. Not for them and for the woman I had been that night. The one who stood frozen while the room laughed, not knowing that silence was her first act of defiance. After the speech, people crowded around with congratulations and handshakes. Investors, journalists, old acquaintances, even a few from that dinner years ago. One woman, a board member who used to dismiss me with a polite smile, said, "You've really turned it all around, Emily. You must be so proud." "I'm grateful," I said simply. Pride fades. Gratitude stays. Later, when the crowd thinned, I slipped out to the terrace. The air was cool, the city glowing beneath a sky streaked with silver clouds. For a long moment, I just stood there listening to the hum of traffic below, the clink of glasses behind me, the pulse of life moving on. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom. "Your father and I watched your speech online. We're proud of you, sweetheart." Ryan called too. He said it was beautiful. I stared at the text, unsure what to feel. Then I typed back, "Tell him thank you. No more, no less." The door opened behind me. Harriet appeared holding 2 champagne flutes. "You disappeared," she said, smiling. "I needed air." "Understandable," she said, handing me a glass. To close, I shook my head gently. "No. To begin." We clinked glasses, the sound sharp against the night. "Do you ever miss the past?" she asked after a moment. I thought about it. The house we grew up in. Dad's booming laugh at Thanksgiving dinners. Ryan before the greed, the boy who taught me to ride a bike and pushed me higher on the swings. Sometimes I said, but missing it doesn't mean I want it back. We stood there quietly watching the city lights flicker like stars reflected in steel. When I got home that night, I found an envelope waiting on my doorstep. The handwriting was neat, almost painfully careful. It wasn't Ryan's. It was Mom's. Inside was a photo me and Ryan as kids, sitting in the backyard with our dog Max. On the back she'd written, "Love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. I hope someday you both remember that." I set the photo on my desk beside a framed picture of the Lumen team. Different families, different kinds of love, both worth fighting for. As I turned off the light, the city glowed outside my window, not as a battlefield this time, but as proof of survival. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began typing the final chapter of my book, The Price of Silence. It wasn't a memoir of revenge or ruin. It was about rebuilding, about how even the most broken stories could become blueprints for something stronger. In the last paragraph, I wrote, "Sometimes the people who break us are the same ones who build our strength. Pain isn't the end of the story. It's the edit that makes the truth visible." The tables turned not because I fought harder, but because I stopped fighting for their approval. I leaned back, letting the words sink in. Then I smiled, small, real, and complete. "Some stories end with applause," I whispered. "Mine ends with peace." If you've ever been laughed at, underestimated, or told you're worth less than someone's dog, remember this: every scar is just proof you survived the lesson. And one day, that lesson might just be your story. If you felt something in this journey, share your thoughts below. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me what's your turning point, because maybe, just maybe, your revenge story is still being written.